We live in historic times, my friend.
We do. I mean, I would say these times are weird, 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 weird. But I think it's in times like this, it's ever more important to get together with only people that look like you, white dudes for podcasts. We gotta, in times like these, we've got to band together only with people who are like us. So that's why I had to reach out to you.
It's the number one thing I've appreciated about you is you look like me.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's just like how else do you find friends, right? You look in the mirror, make sure to check the mirror once a day, and then look around and make sure, be like, hey, does that person look like me? No. No, I don't know. These are, I mean, we're always living in history, right? I mean, I think I had wondered this past week and I didn't bother to look it up. I was too distracted looking up whether calling Democrats childless cat ladies was appropriate. And I so far realized cat, yes, from kind of some spurious like pet-based sources. Democrats are more likely to have a cat than a dog. Republicans are more likely to have a dog. Fascinating to me, not surprising. Democrats are more likely to be women, so ladies, and Democrats are more likely than Republicans to be childless. So at least all the categories are tenable, even though I think calling people that certainly doesn't spark any uh, affinity or union. So, but I wanted to look up, has this ever happened before presidentially, this whole presidential moment we're in, where a party rejected pleas for a primary from their base when the majority of their base asked for it, and then tried to actively sort of railroad, kind of a la Bernie style, the few Democratic candidates who were running, three, right? Three or four like major ones. And then did basically a non-primary, not even like an instant just basically within 48 hours, maybe 72 hours, had just selected, just sort of selected by some process that no one had any access to, any like common people, any citizens had any access to. They just selected the the candidate of a major party. I was fascinated. I was like, has this ever happened before in history where like a candidate was selected by a non-democratic process?
And like not officially yet,
No, but it certainly seems,
but of course for anybody to overcome the momentum of that popular choice would be preposterous at this point.
it would be pretty, yeah. I'm still astonished that it's gone down this way. But I've been astonished so many times over the past 4 or 5 years that in some ways I wonder as to my capacity to continue to be astonished. Like at someday will I lose that? Will I just be like, nothing surprises me anymore?
Your
I don't want
astonishment,
to.
your
Yeah,
fuse has you ran out of fuses to
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. My wick is wickless. My John is wickless.
Well, I wondered about that initially, even with Biden's support of her, and I mean, we were all questioning that in the final. Well, obviously Biden's still president, but in those days before he officially
Or is he?
stepped down,
Yeah. Dun, dun,
um,
dun.
you know, and I think there's lots of reasons, but somewhere in there is probably, how bad does it look for the party to, gosh, I guess to admit what you're saying, to basically diss her and say, hey, you know what, we're gonna, in some ways, obviously, just hey, we're
Yeah.
actually gonna have a democratic process. But Biden could have. It's one thing for Biden to support her and to recommend her,
Yeah.
and that he that's his prerogative. But that
Yes.
and then you could still have a democratic process, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's how I thought we was going to proceed. I thought he was basically saying, hey, I endorse, Harris has my endorsement. And now she would run against a field of a dozen at least people. And I
Yeah.
was like, they're the Democratic Party. They've got plenty of money. They could make this happen in 72 hours. The first debate could be had. You know what I mean? This is not out of the realm of possibility. I think they're still trying to rush it in order to but why you can do that too. They could have just had a debate every 4 days of these people. on television, on the big TV until whatever from now, like what, a week and a half from now at the DNC could have been announced. I mean, it's all possible. That's what I thought was going to happen. And I thought actually Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, came out and was just like we look forward to the democratic process of selecting. And I was like, dude, Obama for the win again. Comes across as a reasonable dude. That was very reasonable. That's and I think just that would be the reasonable expectation of any party member. And then somehow within 72 hours, they were just all even he, whatever, jumped on the phone and endorsed Harris. And then it was
It
like, oh, okay, everyone just jumped. I was like, that was weird. I mean, he's not president, so I don't think he's held to the same standards of hypocrisy or whatever. I mean, he's off just like being a TV executive and living his life or whatever. So he could have just been like, here's what I think we're going to do. And we're going to do this.
it did cascade quickly. And yeah, totally logical that Biden would support her. I mean, that's probably a tricky decision. Even
Yeah.
he must be aware of her record. So, but for him to go against her, for her to be dissed by her standing president,
Yeah.
since it's funny, right? Because there's some piece of this which is not the reason necessarily to elect her, but there's some piece of this, as we all know, as we learned as children, like she would step in, where he
Yeah,
had,
that's the deal. That's the job.
right. So it's like, oh, then I don't know, somewhere deep down in this might be, well, then she must be capable of
Yeah.
stepping into that role.
Yeah.
Maybe even the preferred person, the second around, well, the first
Yeah.
step into that role.
Yeah.
Um, but you've been digging deep as usual and finding that's not necessarily the case.
Well,
And
that's it's just fascinating to me, obviously, in terms of, and this will get us to our subject here today, that when she ran in 2019, I don't even think she made it to 2020 in terms of running for president. Like she ran in a Democratic primary. She was one of whatever, like 12, 15 like candidates of note. She didn't make it, I don't believe, to the first vote. I think the first actual like delegates casting ballots or whatever was in Iowa, maybe. I don't know. I might be misremembering it. Regardless, I don't think she actually made it that far. Like she got tanked. She very famously like came out against Biden for his segregationist past and for his sexual assault accusations. And so that was kind of part of her strategy, play aggressive because she's an attorney, right? Why not be that, play that role? She got smoked into like an inability to answer by Tulsi Gabbard famously, because they were kind of vying for like who's going to be the top female in this contingent, especially younger female and both women of color. And so, yeah, she didn't do well. People didn't like her. They didn't find her likable. They didn't find her credible as like a presidential candidate. So the Democrats themselves did that. So then when she got picked as VP, that was super weird. Because it seemed kind of like Trump just did this with Vance. Vance was like a never Trumper, and now he's the VP. Harris was very similar, and like, yes, you've sexually assaulted all these women, and you're a segregationist. You'd think, okay, you're not going to work with that. You just burn that bridge. But no, in some ways, I think for both of those people, compliments to Biden, compliments to Trump, like picking someone who has openly been like, I don't like you and what you do. Good, you should have people like that in your life. That's helpful. That's whatever helpful tension. So yeah, I just thought that was super weird. And then the past 4 years is from the left press, because it really mostly the people who talk about her the most. It's been nothing but bad press for Harris, as she went from being like mildly popular because people didn't know who she was, like the general public, into she has like a negative polling rating. So does Trump, by the way, but like that's much more explainable because like we've all seen everything that hates about Trump trumpeted endlessly for 6 years, 7 years. So, but Harris just kind of quietly like lost her staff, kept turning over. She like supposedly ignored her staff. She was seen as bullying. Like no good report. There was no good report. And I was just saying to you offline that the White House even put out a statement in that first year, sort of talking about how essential she was. It was really just like a spin control White House statement on the vice president is essential and part of every decision we make and blah, 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 because they had to do spin control internally because the internal political wonk talk from staffers and blah blah, all that sort of, whatever DC gossip. Let's be honest, was just that like she was a nightmare. She was a nightmare to work with. People don't like her. Her laugh is weird. There's endless uh, scenes of her saying things that make almost no sense. She's no like I think someone summed it up the best. They said she's like writing that essay in you do your word count on your essay in high school and you find out you're 500 words short, and so you just go back and kind of make all your points over and over again. You like restate your points 3 or 4 different times to fill out the space. That's how she talks. She's sort of like a natural filibusterer. And so all she's had is pretty bad, terrible reputation for years and years and years. And then suddenly she's the nominee and everyone's like, I'm with her. And anyway, and then even the AP and Reuters were like, oh, Democrats confronting the racist, sexist past of this country when they pick Bubba. I was like, wait a second, you're already trundling out if you don't have a problem with this lady, you're racist and sexist, which to me is like, there's a centrality of identity issue here such that the country has been arguing. People in this country have been arguing about for quite a long time, but I think especially the past 3 or 4 years.
Well, let's bring it to the front center, to the national stage.
Let's do it.
Therefore, our question today is, should we vote identity?
It should be, is the question. And my simplest, because I always, if there's a way to do it simple, I want to do that first and then spend 7 hours talking about it afterwards, about how it could also be this way and also be this way. The simplest way for me to say it is, like, if you vote or pick someone based on their Black femaleness, which we know Harris, there was direct pressure. This journalist certainly documented this, that ahead of time, much like his Supreme Court pick, Biden said ahead of time he was trying to find like a woman of color, if not a Black woman specifically. So we know that identity elements were somehow involved, whether spuriously or how seriously those were. We weren't in the room where the sausage was made.
I never questioned that for a minute. I mean, that
seems to be.
About her.
Yeah,
I was at that moment probably my peak woke for me personally, beyond protests, all of it. I was just like, hell yeah. Not only a Black woman, but an Indian woman to boot. It's a twofer.
Yeah, twofer, right? Although it's funny because like Tulsi Gabbard, again, did better in the primaries. I think is a better orator, if nothing else. I don't know her as a statesperson. She also has a military background, which is going to help get certain votes in. And she did better than Harris in the Democratic primaries. So it's almost like if they held open auditions and two women of color one did better than the other, and then but another one got the job anyway. Like so in that way, it almost starts to go, well, was it even about it? I mean, to me, that's the one argument to be had that is like, well, it's not really about identity because they had two people of the same broad identity categories, women of color, running, and the one who did better objectively, like got more votes, lasted longer, like went out in the later round, she didn't get the nod. They accused her of being a Russian plant, which of course they do with, whatever, Trump supporters and people who support Palestine or whatever. It was one of those, things. But that was especially fascinating at the time that they picked. Although she was also at the time, Biden is sort of seen as a centrist, although he's not particularly centrist, but he's a centrist on the left. Like he's fully left, but he's centrist in the left. He's not like deeply progressive, and he's not like super in the middle or whatever. So he's centered. He's not center left, but he's centered in the left. And she was voted, I don't know, some like whatever, what is it? Senatorial watchdog kind of pundits, whatever. She was called the most liberal, and that's not in the classic sense, in the modern sense, essentially the most progressive senator in the Senate. So in some ways, she was picked possibly for that identity as well, which is to like get him the far left votes, essentially.
Harris was called the most progressive.
Yeah. Again, I never checked their data. I'm not saying whether they were right or wrong, but that was her reputation by their analysis. So literally the farthest left. So then she was picked because she was super, super far left. She was melanated and she was female. Um, those things were all elements of why she was selected. So the simplest way for me to look at it, and I'll kick it back to you, is if JD Vance was specifically picked because he was a white, they're like, we're going to make sure to go out and pick a white male, and that's why they picked JD Vance. I would assume most people would label that as some form of racism, even a soft racism, perhaps. Um, that he wanted an affinity group. Trump wanted an affinity group with another white dude. But if that was specifically part of the paradigm, I would call that at least racist in a soft way, lowercase r. And so I can't, in principle, call that anything else when other people do it. Because that's essentially what has been an indication of systemic racism throughout history, right? Is looking at all the presidents we've had, white man, white man, white man, white man. And if they were picked because of that whiteness, then that is specifically the racist part. And if they weren't, people just liked them, then whatever, then there's no racism there. But if they were, and that's sort of the inference of looking at every time you in your grade school, you might have all the presidents on the wall, and they're all, you notice they're all pretty pale and they're all pretty dudeish. Then you go, oh, okay, well, if they were picked because of those elements, then that would be racist and sexist. So likewise, if your voting identity of some other basis, that also has to be principally has to be racist and sexist as well. There can't be special exceptions for people, because then that would be the same. You'd carve out, then a white supremacist or whatever could carve out that same exception for themselves, being like, well, no, it's not racist when it's a white male.
So yeah, so you and I have talked about that subject a lot, because guess what? It runs through just about everything.
Yeah.
And so Biden is the 46th president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
All have been men.
Yep. And all but
Are
two
there
have
any
been.
others? One was black. Are there any others that have other?
Yeah, I mean, it was surprising when was a Catholic. John F. Kennedy, wasn't he a Catholic? When a
Yeah.
Catholic got in, that was highly notable. Um, there have been ones that didn't have blue eyes, because I think most of the presidents have had blue eyes, which is fascinating. Um, but I get it. Blue eyes are gorgeous on dark people, light people. Killian Murphy. You look at Killian Murphy. I can look in his eyes all day long. Eddie Swindler. So blue eyes are gorgeous. I don't know. We just find them spellbinding because they're like, it's the ocean and it's the sky and it's in your face. It's pretty cool. Um, what else? But yeah, other than that, they look pretty like a bunch of pale dudes generally,
So
quite consistently.
yeah, and so I won't fight against the idea of picking somebody purely based on, let's say, race. Is racism. It's a favoring race above other characteristics, maybe
Yeah,
in spite of other characteristics.
yeah.
I think the defense there is that it's a kind of corrective racism. And I think this is actually an interesting lens to look at systemic racism, because one way
Mm.
to think about the presidents, I mean, I'm assuming women formally couldn't be president for a large number of years. I mean,
I'm assuming to post suffrage at
women, it was
least.
only,
Yeah,
I just saw this actually. It's like the
yeah,
50-year anniversary of a woman being able to get a credit card without a man co-signing for it.
yeah.
So I'm assuming if that was
And
true,
look at what happened to credit card debt since then. If we're just looking at causal data, that's pretty
that's
fascinating, isn't it?
that's a separate conversation.
I know, but I'm just saying, isn't that amazing? Like, if we this is the great thing, if we only use like causal data, is like you can branch off into any claim we want, man. But yeah, no, I'm assuming post pre-suffrage women wouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, right. If they couldn't vote, how could
Yeah,
how so systemically, women were not even allowed to be in that office.
yeah, specifically kept out. Yep.
So to me, that's maybe one of the best examples of systemic sexism that I've ever seen.
Yes.
And so now we're saying, hey, now you have all these rights. You can vote, you can be president, you can do all the things, and yet they haven't yet. So,
Yes.
to me,
Yeah.
I'm a believer that we need to push through I don't know if the glass ceiling reference is played out or not, but let's say the glass ceiling in the case of women, um, whatever barriers exist, because we've theoretically taken away the barrier, but we haven't actually accomplished putting somebody in that seat. You know, it's fat. I'm surrounded by people. I mean, we know I'm progressive. Most of my folks are. So
Yeah,
like I'm surrounded by people who are literally saying things like, I don't care. It's just time to have a woman. I don't care.
yeah,
I'm tired of telling my daughter that we've never had a woman president, stuff like that.
yeah.
And I'm actually, there's a big part of me that's on board with that. My worry, logically, is holy shit, could this backfire? Because if we
But
put a
yeah,
woman in who is like a terrible president, then we
yeah,
say, hey, we had for some reason I think it's actually 45 men serving in 46 presidencies. It's like we had 45 men and they went this way, and then this
hmm,
one woman, you know, and people are gonna obviously say whatever the hell they want, and
yeah. Oh
they're
my
gonna make that
gosh,
case anyway.
there's been bad presidents of every stripe.
But that's I think how that that argument could go even
Yeah.
beyond what you're saying, which is just like, well, what the hell? I think you're saying that's potentially a horrible reason to choose a president,
Well, it would be you can
or
no longer, yeah,
hypocritical. Yeah.
yeah, you can no longer tell people that people voting for white people is racist anymore. You lose that. This is just like since the Democrats just ignored democratic process in order to pick their nominee, they can't really talk about Republicans trying to overthrow democracy anymore. Like that, that's in some ways this is good. So people want to just be like, yeah, that's why I'm voting. And so then that means if some dude is just like, I want a white male president. That's really that's what I'm waiting to see. I want my children to know that white men are the best leaders on the planet. Okay, same. It's the same thing.
Oh man, that's
What?
the soundbite somebody's going to pull out of this
Yep.
podcast and
Yep. They totally will.
ruin
Bring it
you.
on. Yeah. Bring it on. Bring it on. So that's the same thing. It's you're making the same thing. It's like I just want to see, and you're just like, well, but we haven't had one of mine before. So what does that have to do with anything? But that has nothing. That certainly has nothing to do with content of character or proficiency or I mean it's just it has no relation. Now, are you allowed to vote that way? Sure. You can literally have a cat who likes to like paint, likes to like put its paws in things and make messes and put a ballot in front of that cat and have whatever smear goes on whichever candidate and you vote for it based on what your cat likes. It's all allowed. Is it ethical or is it in principle consistent or is it hypocritical? I guess in principle really is almost the big question. So it's like it's because that's right. Should we vote on identity? Not can we certainly can. I just looked up while we were talking. The first woman to run for president was Victoria Woodhull in 1872, some 50 years before women throughout the United States had achieved the right to vote. She did not win, or else we would know her name much quicker. And as we all know, because there's been movies made about it, and she's, I think, much more famous, Shirley Chisholm, of course, was the first Black woman to run for US president. To me, it's been interesting to look at this intersectionally, where they just want a woman to be president. Jill Stein has been running for quite a long time. Much longer than Harris. So if it was really just about having, I didn't want to tell my child not, then Jill Stein was waiting there for that exact sentiment previously. So anyone who says that, I don't believe you. And if you're like, well, we've only had one Black president, I want another Black president. Cornel West has been running for, Marianne Williamson also as a woman, been running quite a long time. Tulsi Gabbard ran for president, and you know what? People didn't push her to the top three. So it seems like Democrats generally, when the Democratic primaries went on, they didn't care about this in 2019 and 2020. So I don't understand how 4 years later, then it's like now was the time that it's going to be this lady. So it's not those identities individually, because no, I haven't seen these same people talking about Cornel West as the candidate they like, and I haven't seen people talking about Jill Stein or Marianne Williamson. So it's not women, and it's not Black. Is it the intersectional of the two? Like is that the sort of obsession, right? Because maybe that was partially why Harris was picked, and that's partially why the latest Supreme Court justice was picked. And then so it's just like this is like Black women. We're going to just highlight. But if you narrow the field to any identity only, just practically, that doesn't make any sense in terms of finding the best leader. What you don't want to do is eliminate any identity category. You want to include Black women amongst the possible people you want to pick to run the country. That's how I feel about it anyway. I think you should eliminate you should provide no barriers to entry in order that we get people running, being elected to all manner of offices in order to gain the experience necessary to move up the scale, right? Because that's really the problem with barriers, is then it actually means, culturally speaking, let's say white men have this like hundreds and hundreds of years head start on actually learning how to do the job. Like if only like black men were pilots, airline pilots for the past, since Tuskegee, they were like, man, these folks are real good at flying planes. Let's have them fly all the planes. And then all of a sudden, like only black men flew planes, like to 80% of pilots were black men. Then that means people who aren't black men are going to have a disadvantage, even just culturally. It's going to be harder for them to just like learn and be around it and like be steeped in it, let alone the expectation stuff. And so you don't want to place barriers there, like they're not allowed to be, but you can't assume that the first year that like white men are allowed to be pilots. It's like, well, we better make them they better come and represent the country. We better push a bunch in. That doesn't make any sense. They haven't been able to do this. Like they're going to need some time to like understand like how to do the job. They might instinctually know. They might have known their whole life. So the barriers, let's take all the barriers down. I'm fully on board with as a liberal. But selecting it as the number one thing seems to betray a principle that is held by the same people who are saying it. So that's so in the should, I was saying you shouldn't do that because it makes you look, it makes you appear as, if not defines you as a hypocrite. And I don't think anybody wants to be a hypocrite.
Well, or at least not called out for it. Another notable,
yeah.
Another notable woman, of course, Hillary Clinton. And
yep.
I remember that, I remember talking to my mom after she lost to Trump, and, she was just devastated. I mean, not only was she a Clinton supporter, and that's a that's a rabbit hole we could jump down. But it was like in that moment, I remember her saying, the message she received as a middle class, middle America white woman in her 70s was the country just said, men are more important than women. And a lot of that was rooted in anti-Trump furor, which I think there's two other intersection points happening in this moment, right? We've got defeat Trump furor. We did a whole episode on Trump derangement syndrome. And mix in Joe's decline. Like there was this escape hatch component to this, which mixes with what I said earlier about, okay, gosh, we know Joe's out. Holy shit, what are we gonna do? Do we try to bring somebody else in? Well, that's like a weird swipe to the VP, who actually could win on identity, if not other factors. And so, and then I don't know, like we both have witnessed and named I don't know, a couple days, 72 hours after Biden endorsed her. I think there was a moment of questioning, like, oh, Biden's out, but then, whoa, it just cascaded. And then you sent an article that really, really landed deeply for me as somebody who spent so many years supporting Black Lives Matter, because they came out and said, this is bullshit. Like, we need to actually follow a democratic process here. And they were explicit that this was not anti-Harris at all. They weren't even judging the candidate. They were judging the process.
It's just like, stick her in there. I think it would have been astonishing or ridiculous to not include her on the list by virtue of her being the VP and having a presidential endorsement. But it was weird. I think this is my theory, a lot of the fervor of like Harris, and even the cleaving to the identity is a mental way to not think about anything. So in that way, I think you shouldn't, based on identity, because it means you've ceased to think thoroughly. Where you're just like, I'm just going to glom onto these two things. I think that's partially where people did it, because then they couldn't focus on the fact that for 2 years previous, press that they think is like tearing the country apart and hateful and evil and racist and transphobic and homophobic, has been talking about how Joe Biden is not cognitively okay. They're talking about for 2 years. And then their press, the leftist press, has been running interference for him on that largely, not entirely, absolutely, but largely. Very famously, that quote from the dude on CNN, it's like Morning Joe or something, it was like, this Biden is the sharpest Biden. And before the debate, remember, sharpest attack, sharpest attack, sharpest attack. They sent out, just like with this weird, calling everyone weird thing, they sent out some sort of talking points. They did it with the border czar thing within 48 hours of her being endorsed. They're like, well, remember, she wasn't really, just say she wasn't really the border czar. There is real no such position truly. It's really, and she really was just looking at systemic causes for immigration. And, there's this whole spin, and they found a document, right? Whatever, the press has already reported it. So like that document must have gone out. And it's like, Joe is sharp as attack, sharp as attack. Then we all watched the debates, or whoever watched the debates. And then everyone else watched the highlights. We're like, dude, it's not sharp as attack. Now, he never has been, right? We have to remember that with Joe Biden. This would make it harder identifying. If you famously, in Robin Williams' last stand-up special, he went on a whole Joe Biden rant about how ridiculous everything Joe Biden says is, right? He's famous for saying things that are crazy. That's kind of like his deal. So it's been that long that we've been talking about this as a culture. So for 2 years, people just pretended like that wasn't happening. And then for 4 weeks, 5 weeks, this weird, intense pressure by like donor elites and the party, supposedly, and then the New York Times just tried to like bully and pressure Biden to get out because of him kind of showing them that they were asleep at the wheel at their own job. Then they do this non-democratic, they ignore that, they pressure the primaries. They won't give Secret Service protection to RFK until he eventually runs as an independent. They have Dean Phillips running. The media barely covers it. Like everyone's pushing for a primary. It's more than half the Democratic Party wants one. So then all of a sudden, when it's just as simple as get behind the black woman, I think everyone was just like, their minds leapt into action to be like, yes, that's a positive something. And then that way we don't have to talk. If we say this loud enough, we don't have to talk about any of the other stuff. We don't have to think about it. We don't have to look at how that kind of shows some sort of rot in Denmark. That's my theory. So in some ways it is about an identity, but in a lot of ways, I think it's about identity as a cover for thoughtlessness.
Well, so that is a good setup to reveal the new definition of social justice warrior I've been experimenting with, and that is a person with a big heart who avoids complexity. And the big heart part is important, and because I truly believe their hearts often are in the right place. But it's a question of how far does that get us? I mean, again, I'll go back to this idea of, pushing through a barrier, having it done once, which is logical in the sense that I do think we as a society base a lot of things on precedents. Legally, of course, that's a thing, but it's also just, oh, it's ever been done before. Now it's easier because we've done it once. And I mean, theoretically, it's easier. I'm not sure that's always true. Is it easier now to like have a black man be president? I'm not actually sure. I mean, speaking of Obama, like that to me goes back to, a time, I mean, I live in Chicago in Illinois where he was running for senator in 2004. And I lightly volunteered on his campaign. I don't want to make it sound like I was like sitting in the war room with him, but and it was such a weird election. He was basically a shoo-in, so he ended up sending us out to go, support other progressive candidates and stuff. But I will admit, I didn't spend a ton of time, looking into his record. It was like probably much more of an identity-based decision in that moment. And so I will admit being guilty of that. And generally, I mean, I think generally it's positive that we broke that barrier, that we had a black president. And it's come up in a spotted way, I think, in our discussions, but Was he a perfect president? Was he the best president? I mean, there was no perfect president. Um,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, were there problems obviously with what he did, or there,
Yeah.
some people point to the expectations he was held to. Generally, more as the kind of some flavor of the black people work twice as much for half as much. Um, and I think there's some truth to that in the sense of like the scandals other presidents sort of got away with. I
Hmm.
do imagine he was held to a higher standard in that way.
Sort of. Although he didn't, I mean, nothing ever happened to him legally. You know what I mean? Where you look at the impeach, especially around him in the past, like in the presidents running up to him and since. I mean, I think George W. Bush has got away with a ton more. But you look at like Clinton impeachment attempts, Donald Trump multiple impeachment attempts for the whole Russiagate thing for years. I was like, and I that was a non-controversy made into an enormous controversy. So in some ways, then having them side by side was helpful. So then, like, yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people bring up that he wore tan pants and everyone had a fit about it. I was like, everyone didn't have a fit about it. They literally like made memes about it the next day, and some people on the news talked about it. Like it wasn't nothing happened. So yeah, I mean, he didn't really get any big trouble, which is good for him. I'm assuming just in terms of conducting his office. And in 8 years, he didn't really provide
Well, it's
us with
funny. I guess
anything.
I take that as a sign that he kept his nose clean. But
Yeah, maybe. But it doesn't take you even to have to do anything dirty, right? Because the whole Russiagate thing took like 2.5 years and they didn't really find anything. So that was a case of clean nose and it didn't help, you know? I mean, so that's kind of our fascinating side. We have a good side by side at least for that. Yeah. Well, was it a good thing? I mean, that's the question. Like, is it a good thing? Or it's certainly not a good thing that it's remarkable. It's not a good thing that was remarkable that like a black man ran for president and won. You're like, oh, that could have happened earlier, right? We've had black Congress people for like 100 years or something. So
right, I
it
think
seems weird that no one rose to that top yet.
like a feature of whatever we want to call it, justice, equality, equity, having equal, I don't know if it's equal distribution or just a distribution, a representation that is actually equal to the population. Maybe that
Yeah.
would be a reasonable thing to strive for. Um,
Or to see, yeah, well, to see if it's possible.
to
I
see if
don't
it's
think it is.
possible.
Yeah, because I mean, it's weird to just assume that everyone's equally good at everything.
Right.
You know what I
And
mean? Like the Olympics are happening right now, and there's some events where which is a pretty merit-based, relatively merit-based, but you don't see a ton of like US like white ladies running in the relay race. And no one's like, well, we got to see if we can bump these numbers up. I don't know. Certain people are good at certain things, man. And Kenyans are the fastest, or like the best long distance
right,
runner on the planet.
right.
That's a specific country. So in some ways, it's a weird idea that somehow maybe it's utopian, right? Maybe this is the part of the big heart thing that you're talking about. But it's more of a feelings based thing, I think, than a fact based thing, where you're like it's, but it's also weird to have 90% or whatever, 90, whatever. I'm not that great at math. Let's call it 95% of all presidents, being pale white dudes.
Okay, so we can agree that's a weird thing. I mean, we know why that happened in terms of our history, but it's just statistically like, maybe that's not quite right. The the thing I was going to get at was that one measure of sort of making it to
Yeah.
this next step, whatever we want to label it as, would be that everybody gets to be mediocre. Like every identity gets to be mediocre,
Yeah.
right? Gets to like it can't just depend on exceptionalism, right? I mean, in many ways, and I think Obama is an exceptional dude in terms of just his intelligence and how you mentioned it earlier, just he shows up and sounds reasonable,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
He did
seems
an
like a low
awesome job at
bar,
that. It does, right?
but it's like maybe not.
Well,
Um,
and it's something that people, if we're looking at people voting on the basis of identity, it might be not even something that people want.
that's
Because
right.
if
No,
they're not,
I remember John Stewart did a thing about that years ago. It was like,
yeah,
we don't, his whole thing was, don't we want exceptional, brilliant, arguably, he might even use the word elite people
yeah,
to be doing extremely difficult, challenging, complex things.
yeah.
Like,
You'd hope so. I mean, there are some alchemical aspects of leadership. Um, and so it makes it a little trickier to like objectify, like use objective reasoning in order to like, here's this, this person has it's not like rolling for a D&D character. I mean, like charisma 18. Oh, okay, there you go. He has that. Like, we don't know in terms of people. Everyone receives, people love Donald Trump and find him wildly charismatic. And other people are like, I can't stand looking at him for longer than 10 seconds before I want to smash my television screen.
so one question that emerges,
Yeah.
you thank you for looking up the women that have run, and actually that's
Yeah.
fascinating that a woman ran for president before she couldn't even vote for herself, I guess.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? That was
Like,
pretty, I mean, big ups to that lady. And
because I guess
Shirley Chisholm in 72, about 6 years before we were born, was the first black woman to run for president. So a black woman running for president has not been remarkable in our lifetime.
no,
Like the precedent was broke before we were born. So
that's
it's not like,
fascinating.
what is happening? Can you believe this is, I mean, in some ways historic. You're like, not really. I mean, we're talking about firsts or precedents or whatever. Now, this Kamala Harris has, a phenomenal amount of institutional support, which makes it remarkable. So that it is different. But in terms of like precedent breaking, you're like, what do you mean? Like that already happened. Like it happened before we were born.
Yeah. Well, so here's an exercise in reducing complexity.
Yeah.
So of all those candidates, those female presidential candidates you mentioned, did they seem, based on what maybe did they
Yeah.
seem like just better candidates than Kamala?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much almost everybody on the stage seemed better than her. And that's what the Democratic Party agreed on as well.
Well, I
So,
mean the ones throughout history,
oh,
like
throughout history.
Shirley Chisholm, and I don't know,
Oh,
maybe that's
Shirley
a
Chisholm.
hard thing to
Oh,
compare.
yeah, that is harder to compare. I'd never even heard of the first woman to run for president, Victoria Woodhull, but she sounds like an awesome lady, just from Encyclopedia Britannica. Um, uh, Hillary Clinton is a better candidate than Kamala Harris. It's just a recent example in terms of she's kind of in the Donald Trump vein, and that she's like she's a little on the mean side. I think Donald and Hillary are both kind of mean. Um, they're mean, a little bit ruthless, a little bit Machiavellian in their like, here's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it however I want to do it. They both are pasts stained with controversy, uh, and both very likable to some people and completely unlikable to others. But she was a much stronger candidate, much more obvious candidate. Yeah, Harris is a weird one because it's just like it's a little like Obama in that Obama's ascendancy into office and then to run for president was astonishingly fast. I don't know if it's the fastest in history, but it was super duper fast. Because again, from 2004, that was his first elected office, right? The first time he won elected office. So
Oh, and
2000.
it was
So
funny. I
that's
I was in
a
a
quick
minority.
turnaround.
Oh, very
Yeah,
quick. I was actually in a minority until 2004. Everybody was like, he'll be president someday. And I was like, well, yeah, that's probably true. But,
yeah.
that's a ways
In
out.
20 years. Yeah,
Yeah. And it's like, oh, 4 years later.
4 years.
And
Yeah,
2004 was kind of my big, let's get political year. And so
yeah, yeah,
I did some canvassing for John Kerry. And I'll
yeah,
always remember this. I went to the first meetup group for John Kerry after he won the primary. And it was like,
yeah.
literally the first question they asked was, who was everybody's first choice?
Mm,
And so, not surprising that he lost.
yeah,
It's the the danger of compromise, where it's like, well, we're all gonna sort of agree on this, second
yeah,
choice.
yeah. Well, same thing with Biden. Like no one was enthused about Biden. They just thought he had the best chance to win against Trump. So it becomes a negative. And I honestly, I think the Harris pick is partially about that, although it's partially just baffling. To me, the Harris pick is kind of like, are we going to watch? Is the media, like news media, going to be able to manipulate the public enough, or include Google in that? Right? I sent you the link of like if you Google Donald Trump it brings up a whole bunch of Harris articles right underneath it in the role. And if you do Harris, it brings up a bunch of Harris things with a Trump thing here or there too. So because of course they are possibly running against each other for president, but it was pretty obvious. I was like, oh wow, will the media be able to manipulate the population into liking somebody that they don't like? Because we have all the evidence already that they don't care about Kamala Harris and they don't like her. But all of a sudden, everyone's acting like we've liked her and we're so excited for this opportunity to vote for her. When it was like, but you weren't 4 years ago, so I don't believe you. So it's weird to me as I look at my social media scroll. I'm like, I don't believe you. Like, I literally think you're lying to yourself. Like, I think you're lying to yourself because, again, like, oh, I don't want to. I want to tell my kids we had a woman president.
So this
You've
is
had that up.
fascinating. I mean, what
You're
could
allowed.
this
That's not true.
be? What
Yeah,
could this be other than identity?
yeah.
Like
I
what?
assume so.
And so we're both saying, okay, so Kerry back in the day, Biden, I mean,
Yeah.
all of these kind of milk toast, second choice, whatever.
Oh my
All of a
gosh.
sudden, we've got somebody who objectively is not a great candidate politically,
No, in terms of
but
record, yeah,
but but oh my God, is suddenly rallying all the support. And like I said earlier,
it's
I believe a
fascinating.
good chunk of that must be the anti-Trumpness of it.
Yes, yes, and it's listen, it's strategic in that it makes she is not known for being as openly unlikable, and she doesn't look as unlikable as Hillary Clinton. Like you look at Trump's face during the
Right.
debate, he's got a slappable face, right? I think. Listen, he's got a slappable face. He does.
Yeah.
Like whatever. He's
Smart. He's like the
he's smart.
smart
He's super
baby.
smart. Yeah, he's super smarty. So and likewise, Hillary Clinton, like she looks like if you walked into your class and you had her as a teacher and you just didn't know who she was, you'd be like,
Like,
oh dang, oh we're in for it. Whereas Kamala doesn't look that way. Kamala looks like I don't know. She's like maybe a little. She's like your ditzy, maybe even fun teacher, right? She's like cringy. She's super cringy, but you're like you might like her. So I'm just thinking about this like as a we look to our leaders kind of like teachers, and that's our pattern where if we all went to school, that's like the closest thing we had to like a leader who we had to follow, other than our own parents. So Trump can't bully her around and win, like in debates or like he has to tread carefully and not just look like the kind of bully that he is. Now, Kamala Harris is known for being a bully. So we have that on our side, but most people are ignoring her entire history now and pretending like she's somehow just hatched from I don't know, the ashes of the Civil Rights Museum that was burned by white supremacists or something. You know what I mean? And so he can't and I learned this in doing comedy, doing improv. You gotta do comedy real specific. If you're a dude, especially if you're a bigger, larger dude, and there's a smaller woman on stage, it really works best comedically if you don't take the dominant power position in your comedy scenes.
mm,
You can't do it. Or even, and you look at how this is played out throughout our comedy in our social sphere. Like, look at the cliche of the sitcom where the mom or the woman in the relationship pretty much runs things, and the dude is a doofus.
yeah.
Especially if he's big, like a King of Queens, or what was that one, an Abashala or whatever. Like it's usually often like a
Family
large
Guy.
dude. Yeah, Family Guy, right? And a smaller woman, and he's kind of a doofus. He is not the power. He might have some social power, but he doesn't really have power there. He's less powerful in the dynamic always,
It shows up
almost
in our
always.
ads too, right?
Yes, absolutely. So if he can't violate that our cultural premise, which is like if you're a big dude, you actually are supposed to be deferential. And I've rarely seen Trump be deferential to anyone. So
Hmm.
so then that does present a candidate that's hard for him to attack. Now, there's tons of fuel to attack her on, but he's never done a great job of like attacking on record and
Right.
on like you
On
know what I mean?
real things.
Yeah, he'll start there and maybe say a thing or two that his handlers or whatever told him to say, and then he'll be like, "And what's her deal? What's her?" And then he'll just I don't do a Trump
How's her
impression.
golf swing?
Yeah, exactly. It'll just send into like personal attacks, and if you're a big man attacking a small woman, because she's only like 5'2", I think she'll be the shortest. She might be the. It's so funny. The media talked about this a lot with Ron DeSantis, how short he was, and that he had to wear heels. So if we see Kamala in heels, this is how you know if your media is a hypocrite or not. We better see as many comments about her shortness and her wearing heels to look taller. Because I got to tell you how many jokes I heard about DeSantis online and even in the media about him. Oh, I think he's wearing platforms. Those are secret platform shoes. He's trying to look taller. So if she does that, we have to hear the same thing, guys. Or again, sexist. So in that way, she sort of makes sense. But it's much when you look at Kerry or Biden, not huge fans of either of those people, but those guys have like huge records. They have like 40 years in service, and Kerry had been serving for like 20 something years. So you have at least this record of like, okay, people still were like, oh, but they're meritorious candidates because they have this long record of public service and that's part of what will carry them through to the end. The merit was at least involved there. But in the case of a Harris and it really even in a Obama, it was like there's not a record to point to. Same thing with Trump, though, not a record to point to. They're like, but the Trump thing worked, so let's just go on like personality and bullying, you know?
So last question, and I think we've touched on a little bit of this, but certainly some of the couple things you sent. Does a politician's identity relate or increase their ability to enact policies that actually support the other people of that shared identity?
No. I mean, if you look at Obama, it seems like no. I mean, that's the constant cries. People like Obama was in and he didn't do anything extra. He didn't do anything for black people, which is great. That's a good thing. You don't want Trump getting in and doing a bunch of stuff, special stuff for white people. You don't want anyone going in and doing special stuff for whatever identity group they consider themselves for. You even listen, you don't want people being Catholic coming in there and all of a sudden Catholic Church starts getting all these special grants. Or the Christian, or whatever. It's hard with Christian denominations because they're so divided. But like someone came in as a Baptist, Southern Baptist, right? And all of a sudden the Southern Baptist Convention starts getting all these like tax breaks. You would never want that. And so to me, even when people act like that should have happened, I was like, that is jacked up. It's jacked up. Like if a fellow white person said that, I was like, well, he's not in there doing anything for white people. Now, if he's out there attacking white people as a white person, I'd be like, oh, that's weird. But weird, there it is again. Keeping it going, keeping the catchphrase, keeping the hot slang going. But it would be weird if you then actively are like, I'm trying to benefit my group. That's that's what we hate in presidents, right? If they benefit, they're a billionaire and they try to benefit other billionaires. You're just like, you're the worst. So it'd be the same for anything.
So the identity choice is because ostensibly it's about, I mean, you hear that a lot. It's like, oh, yes, this person who looks like me is gonna finally lift up my people because everybody else has ignored them. Let's just say black folks. As a huge generalization, but you certainly and so I agree with you. Like that. Let's always look at this more holistically. Let's always try to Well, you and I may disagree a bit on the concept of equity and like who we lift up and how we distribute things, and we won't go deep into that. But I do generally agree that like, oh, it's quite a slippery slope that somebody gets in and just starts supporting everybody who looks like them. And so if it's not that, then is the identity argument strictly about opening up the possibility for future generations in a way that's visceral, like that's not just theoretical. Like, well, hey, more little girls are gonna say, I want to be president someday.
Yeah, maybe. And then the question is, I mean that's a tenable argument as to like why to do it. But then are we continuing to propagate by that? Aren't we continuing to propagate that which we dislike, which is identity-based thinking generally, meaning like it shouldn't matter. So we think the path to getting to it shouldn't matter whether you're a woman or not is to focus intensely on you being a woman. That seems contradictory to me. It's not impossible. There are all sorts of contradictions that make their way into tenable outcomes. But that part is definitely difficult. Like in terms of this is the funny thing. That's a very complex thought. That's an intense amount of complexity that we have to do something that we don't want, that we shouldn't do in order that people stop doing things like that. That's very complex.
And that is a discussion I've had in some more, I'd say, more mature social justice groups. So it's just well, let's walk this out. Like where's the line where we magically declare, oh, great, we've broken enough barriers.
Yeah.
But now we can just sort of say, hey, everything's equal and it's a playing field, and good luck.
Yeah. All right. Peace out, everyone. We're not helping anyone anymore. Yeah, you never want to stop helping, so that makes sense. But yeah, that's the thing. It's like, well, then it makes it so it can't have ever been wrong to do to vote for people because they were white males as a dominant premise. Because see, this whole idea of like, oh, everyone has to be included is that's a sort of a religious belief. So then sure, maybe I like it. I'm down. I mean, I'm down to subscribe to that. Let's but my thing is more like let's have no barrier. You don't want to have extra barriers. You don't want to block anyone from coming in. I don't care about people coming in at that point. Just take away all the barriers. That's the only thing I care about personally. So then if you're going to do it, you can't say that it's wrong to do it. And you can't even have the position internally that it's wrong to have done it in the past, which it created the scenario you're trying to overcome. So then you must think some part of that is wrong.
So,
So then
yeah, so it's
it
like,
is Machiavellian.
is the
Yeah.
lack of precedent a barrier in and of itself? Maybe that's the core
Yeah. Yeah.
question.
Well, and how do you overcome that without doing the thing that you said was wrong to do?
I'm not sure you do, which is the
Yeah.
part of me that justifies an identity vote.
Yeah. So then you can't. So you just do, in which case it's no longer, this is amazing. If you do it in order to create an outcome you want, then you are assenting that the original scenario, there was nothing wrong with it.
No, we just
Also, yeah.
don't tell our kids about it, and then we say, you know,
Yeah. You're like, why was it like
clean
that?
slate. We did all the sinning, clean slate for you. You're good.
Yeah, 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 yeah. What was all the error? We did the error. But then let's say could they continue to pick in a particular fashion, it once precedent has been broken, then we have to have, I guess, an even more complex conversation, which is then why these particular people succeed in this particular area.
Well, I mean, I don't know. To me, historically in America, black and white is clearly a specific kind of identity combination.
Yeah,
And you could also imagine this never ending. You could say, well, we've never had a, I don't know, Puerto Rican Jew president. I mean,
yeah,
we need that. It's like,
yeah. Everyone has to be brought in. Now, I'm not opposed to lottery style president's election. I'm not so committed to democracy that I think it's the obviously the Democrats aren't either. So like whatever, like we could just do the lottery. Didn't they used to do that? Was it ancient Greece or somewhere had like a lottery system for picking senators? Maybe I'm thinking of a different culture, but other cultures have tried it. I'm like, I'm down. Just have a lottery system, and then people can say just that like they refuse or whatever.
just pure
You get,
lottery. Just you'd get a call
yep,
one day and be like, hey,
yeah,
do you want to be president?
yeah. I'd say you'd have to be maybe 28. I know it sounds unfair, but I want you want the brain to be fully formed.
I think 35, right, for president?
Yeah, yeah. But I just think 20, like in the late 20, you can just call it 30 for even sake, 30,
Yeah,
30 even. You just want the brain to be fully formed. I just want to give us that advantage as a nation.
I'm with that. Yep.
And then, but this, I mean, this is the fascinating thing because then we're already in the area of, for Harris specifically, they've eliminated, I don't know the racial makeup of people who have selected her, but I'm gonna bet it's not that great of a distribution. So then we have rejected the concept in order to embrace the concept. You've rejected the concept really of even the people picking, of all the people getting an equal opportunity to pick. So you've really already rejected like identity prioritization by having only like whatever Democratic delegates or elite Democrats, which are going to skew a particular racial direction. I'm assuming I could be incorrect. I've not looked at all the delegates, but you've eliminated representation and you've eliminated equity in order to try to pick a candidate to select for equity. None of that seems super tenable. It's possible, right? But it's a pretty, you'd have to say from the outside, it's a pretty, it's a lower likelihood that that is what's happening, just based on how they did it. Because then they've rejected the entire population of their, even just their party. So they've said we don't want all, and especially there's for Black people's votes, for example, that the majority of Black people, I believe, are registered Democrats. So you've eliminated them from contention in picking. You've basically said your voice is not important to us. So here, but look how important you are to us, because look at the candidate. Like that
Well,
doesn't seem super realistic.
and then one, I know we need to wrap, but
Yep.
the last dimension that we haven't really even touched on in terms of identity that in many ways might be the most important, as we have discussed in other episodes, is economic and income, and
Yep.
which obviously intersects with all sorts of other identities in various ways. But you sent me this video as when Kamala was the Attorney General in California, that she did this sort of tough on low income parents for truancy thing,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
started
Yeah.
basically locking up, parents whose kids weren't going to school. And I watched one video, so maybe there's more research to be done. Don't know the whole story, but nevertheless, it I had heard certainly a number of whispers about that, about her attitude and her policies as Attorney General,
Yeah.
and
That's
not,
one of the reasons she didn't do well in 2019, 2020, because she was running as top cop. So like
yeah.
she called herself that. And I was like, ooh, bad, bad timing. Bad
And you've
timing.
got the most hardcore social justice warriors were full on defund the police, and they're,
Yeah.
and so I don't know, I should dip into some of those circles and just kind of see what they're saying. I assume they're fully in support just purely based on, you
Yeah.
know, the visible identities and breaking the barriers, but
Yeah.
I would
But
hope
fascinating.
there's some more sophisticated conversations happening about
Yeah,
that.
it's fascinating. Well, that's what I appreciate about the Black Lives Matter. It's like it's not even complex. It's just like, well, here's what happened. Here's what happened. Here's these three ways in which the Democratic Party, who obviously Black Lives Matter like openly supports, and actually they fundraise to the same Act Blue organization. Um, they seem to be pre-endorsing already the Democratic Party based on their attentions. Um, they're going to vote blue probably no matter what. However, they laid it out in simplicity, and to me that was fascinating because I was like, wait, all the people who put their black squares up, their Black Lives Matter black squares. I was like, what's up now? What? Why? This is that fascinating thing for me. I think to look at any community from the outside is go. I look over and I go, oh, okay, those are the rules, and then I look away, and then at certain time passes, I look over there and I'm like, wait, you guys have all new rules again? Maybe that's just the nature of progressive construct, which is to constantly innovate new rules. But then I'm like, but it seems like you're still talking about the same rules, but then that kind of doesn't matter anymore. And actually, even talking about that is somehow like like that stuff is fascinating to me. In as much as, listen, the broad sense, which I never mentioned, like voting based on identity is pretty much what always happens in the modern era, and maybe probably has always happened. You vote essentially on the identity of the person, even if they were all white males vying for contention. You're still picking them based on some aspect of their identity. Now, prep not one's like race or class or whatever necessarily, but just
Hopefully
something about
values and
yeah,
yeah.
values and like who, which I think is a more essential portion of identity. Which is like who are you? What have you done? What do you stand for? Again, what are your principles? What are the principles that you won't violate? Like what like are you hypocritical? Are you a pragmatist? Do you change your mind often? And when you change your mind, do you make it known how reasonable it is? Or even are you funny? I think one of the reasons Donald Trump does really well is he's the funniest presidential candidate we have running.
Yeah.
Like I just mean like he's the most likely to say something to make you laugh that he said on for the reasons of trying to make you laugh, as opposed to one of these like politician pause for laughter and you're like JD Vance, not funny.
I
Tries to
say
make
that a
jokes
lot.
and you're
I
back.
watched
Yeah.
I watched the first episode the first season of The Apprentice 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's an entertaining guy.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's funny. So
so
that's
let's
part of
ask
his
the question.
identity. Yeah.
Should we vote identity? I am this is cheating a little, but I'm like a conditional yes. And
Mhm.
it kind of relates to my tongue-in-cheek mantra that I'll try anything twice. I really feel like
Yeah.
yes, if it's never been done before.
Yeah.
But then we don't have the excuse. It's like, hey, we did it.
You got two. You have two tries. Yeah, and I'm gonna go is it should what was it? Should we vote on identity? Should we? No. Do we? Yes. So should, no, do we? Yes. So thumbs down, but also recognizing my thumbs down isn't stopping anything.
Should we know? Do we? Yes, could be our slogan for the.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
All right, love you.
All right. I love you. I love you and your identity. And it's funny, I was just describing your identity to my kids the other day. We were talking about how we were laughing at the table about like how you would react to something. I don't even remember what it was. It was something about physical proximity, sudden physical proximity, and how it would alarm most people who aren't in your family if you do that to people, if you get all up in their grill. And I was like, oh, well, Andy, I'm not related to Andy. And Andy wouldn't flinch. Andy would wait. It'd be about 20 seconds. And then he probably would nuzzle me. He probably would nuzzle noses. So you are known in our family, one of your identities is that you are a great big cuddle bear.
The nuzzle noser.
Yep. So thanks for being a cuddle bear. I vote for your identity. Cuddle bear.
All right. Love you.
Love you.